Big college football season each and every year, and the Buckeyes in particular. But this season, with two decent opponents, high-quality teams the first 2 weeks, one's out of the way is a 14-point win. The next one, Vegas says, is a 14-point win as well. We shall see on Saturday and preview it, of course, here with Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop from the top, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, and Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. How are we doing today, boys?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Well, Minnesota's in the rearview mirror. I, of course, took my calls and comments and so forth, which is just a portion of what you guys hear on a daily basis. And there was certainly opportunity for the good and for the bad, for the optimist and for the pessimist, because the pessimist will point to giving up 31 points, even when it appeared as though Tanner Morgan wasn't necessarily on his game from start to finish. The pessimist will point to CJ Stroud looking pretty bad after maybe his first 4 or 5 throws through the rest of the first half. The pessimist will say, even when he got it together, it's because he has elite playmakers and he just had to toss him the football. The optimist will say a number of things, and to not delay the analysis, I will just speak to one, that when you recruit 5-star athletes, they're the guys that can change a game like that, both offensively and defensively. Steve, your thoughts about the effort against the Gophers?
Well, I think it went like a lot of us thought. I think most people who studied Minnesota understood it was a veteran team with a huge offensive line, a pretty good defensive line, and playing at home at night. And then you add in the added fact that it sprinkled in the first half and then kind of drizzled in the second half. It was not an easy game for Ohio State. There were 4 lead changes in the game. In fact, it went back and forth. And Ohio State finally grabbed control late in the third quarter on a defensive touchdown to finally go ahead, I think 31-20 at that point. And you thought, well, you know, it looks pretty good for Ohio State at this point. But obviously Minnesota kept coming, and Ohio State really didn't put them away till about 4 minutes to go in the game when they got another defensive turnover with a 14-point lead and were able to ride it out from there. So it went maybe they gave up a few more points in yards than people thought. They gave up over 400 yards offense, 200 yards rushing, 31 points, tied for the most points Ohio State's allowed in a season opener in the modern era of Ohio State football, along with 31 points in the 77-31 win over Oregon State in 2018. And so I think that there are some warning signals on the defensive side of the football, which we can get into. Some reasons for it. Obviously, you had 7 or 8 guys making their first career start in that game, and so on and so forth. So a lot of new and different things happening on the defensive side of the football. Offense, they kind of picked up right where they left off. Well, wouldn't say that. The first half was kind of dreary and dull. They only scored 10 points in the first half, and then 35 in the second. So, 28 on offense and 7 on defense. So offense looks, if they play like they did in the second half, they're going to be a hard team to beat. But that was my nickel version of what I saw, kind of about what you'd think. This wasn't Northern Illinois or Ball State that they were playing. This was Minnesota, 2 years removed from an 11-2 team with a veteran quarterback and a good running back, although he was left the game with an injury. And really the result was a lot of what I think all of us talked about last week, that Minnesota was going to give them a tough game, at least for 2.5, 3 quarters, and that's how it played out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Steve said there. I mean, just, the odds makers coming into the season saying Ohio State was going to be a double-digit favorite in every game, 13, 14 points in most of the major games. It's really easy to kind of take your eye as a fan off the prize and say, well, everything's going to just be a walkover. I mean, they're just going to take care of what they need to take care of, and it's just going to be a pick your score type of situation. These other teams have helmets and shoulder pads and football facilities and scholarships and all that good stuff too. So you have to come out there and be able to compete, and less than ideal circumstances at certain points, a little bit wet. I mean, at least it wasn't the 15-degree game where JT Barrett's still running that touchdown for 80 yards. Granted, we sat there and we watched Mayan Williams. His took a minute to develop as well, but not quite to, it wasn't Barrett-esque. But somebody coming out and having, their first game the way that CJ Stroud did, I think that there's a lot of room for improvement from week 1 to week 2. Minnesota certainly took a bad break, losing Mo Abraham for the season. I mean, he was, well on his way to 200 yards in the game. Ohio State certainly had issues getting guys down to the ground, but I think that's just going to be part of the modern game as you're seeing teams moving away more and more from full practice of tackling in the offseason due to injuries and so on and so forth. So you're really getting most of your early action to start the season. So, there's some good, there's some bad. Is it a game that fans are going to go back and watch 10 times this year? Probably not. But it's a good start. Ohio State's 1-0 in conference play and, really has an opportunity to kind of put an exclamation point on the early season with this Oregon game, because then they can really decelerate with Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, and Maryland.
I think maybe the best thing that came out of this is that Ohio State responded to being down at halftime. They've had some adversity now. They overcame it in resounding fashion. So that's always a plus. The coaches always want to know. They never really know about their team until they're in that position. They think they have a good idea, but until they see it happen. So now they've seen that happen, and the players have experienced it. They've gone into halftime down. So if it happens again, this won't be anything new, and they can rely on past experiences and past successes. In terms of CJ Stroud just throwing it and letting players make plays, I mean, let's remember each of those 4 touchdown passes were precise. And, even the screen pass to Travion Henderson was right over top of the defender, right where it needed to be. The touchdown throw to Garrett Wilson, there was nobody in the vicinity, but Wilson never had to slow down. The first touchdown to Olave was just over top of the defender, like they teach, and was a perfect throw almost off of his back foot. And then the last touchdown to Olave was on the move, rolling out, and it was a perfect strike. So, yeah, they made plays after the catch, but he put the ball where it needed to be. And you can excuse a bunch of guys for having a rough first half of a first start, but now that's passed. I mean, now it's old news. They're all veterans now. We'll see.
So, Tony, you make a good point there. We'll stay with you because Steve mentions the defense, and that's the bigger concern, but we'll start at quarterback because that's what everybody wants to hear. I try to have a balanced approach on this. It's a major game, a major opponent. It's a first start, and it's a first pass attempt ever. So Ryan Day certainly dialed up conservative play calls early in the game, gave him some easy tosses to the outside to Garrett Wilson in particular, and then they started to amp it up from there. But he went through a stretch that was fairly rough there in the first half. But I think you hit on a good point in regards to we tend to think of the deeper throws as being the more difficult throws for obvious reasons, but that's not necessarily always the case. And he did some good things out there. What would be the next steps for you, or anything else to add on the quarterback analysis? Then we'll hit it up with Steve and Kevin.
One of the things that I liked what Ryan Day said is, they were aggressive in the second half, and he said that's a decision that is made during the week. You make that decision during the week to be aggressive, because in the game, you don't want to be as aggressive as you've planned to be, but you have to follow through with that plan. You have to follow through with what you've worked for, what you've practiced for, what you prepared your team for. And if you don't, you don't want to be making those decisions in the while you're emotional or right in the mix, right in the fray of all of it. You've prepared for it. You go ahead and just do it. And so you give the quarterbacks confidence in that way. The starting quarterback won the job for a reason. So use those plays that you have been practicing and rely on these guys. I mean, they're all at Ohio State for a reason. You want to be aggressive. That's what they've been taught. That's what Ryan Day wants to be. He wants to be aggressive on offense and defense. And we remember at times Urban Meyer would start to bog down. And you know what? The best course of action here is just to run JT Barrett for a while, and we'll just go ahead and do that. And that's not what Ryan Day wants to do. He wants to go ahead and make plays and get big chunks of yards, and you saw it.
I'll jump in. I think that this was a great learning experience for a young quarterback. As I think you guys said, overcoming adversity, the rain, the opponent, the fans, night game, Minnesota's defense, everything else that was involved there was really stacked up against him. He threw a first half interception, and he said that, first of all, he didn't think that his head was really where it needed to be. He wasn't really tuned in. And, you know, you can't make yourself feel something that you can't feel. And it's hard to force that feeling that you're locked in. I mean, you've envisioned this moment for your entire life as a football player, that you are now the starting quarterback at a major college university in a big game on network television, coast to coast, and you go out there and for whatever reason, you just don't have it. It just isn't there. The situation is not playing out the way you thought and you dreamed and you envisioned that it was going to be. It's harder than you thought it was. And he said his teammates and his coaches stayed positive, stayed in his face, kept him in the moment, and eventually he got the feeling, and it came around for him, and he channeled it in the second half. He was outstanding, 5 of 8 passing, 236 yards, and 4 of the 5 completions went for touchdowns, and just nothing short of remarkable to watch the way that he rebounded in that second half and made plays. I mean, you take your pick on which one you like the best. I mean, Minnesota would score a touchdown to grab the lead, and Ohio State had it back within a minute of clock time. I mean, it was just I think they scored 3 touchdowns in a span of 6 offensive plays in there at one stretch, and also had the defensive touchdown in there too in the second half. So you really look at it, you got to give him and his teammates and his coaches credit for staying with the plan. It would have been easy to abandon the plan. You're down 14-10 at halftime. You take the lead, then you fall behind again. It would have been easy to abandon the plan, but they did not do that. They stayed with it. They kept attacking, and eventually they hit those big plays. I think what you would hate to see is a team that is comfortable falling behind by 7 or 10 points against a quality opponent, knowing, oh, we've got these touchdown bombs that are always going to be the trump card that we just lay on the table at any moment, because a good opponent can take away those deep passes sometimes and not allow you to make those big plays. I don't know that Penn State, with that great defense that we saw, Iowa, if they ever get to play them, maybe in the championship game, are going to allow those kind of explosive plays, and you're going to need to be consistent on offense. But it is quite a security blanket, and that you've got Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And, now let's get back to seeing more out of Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Jeremy Ruckert, Cade Stover, and the rest. Let's get them all involved going forward.
Yeah, I think you guys touched upon a lot of it. Ohio State only had 3 guys run the ball, had 6 guys catch the ball. I mean, it was very short rotations in terms of who actually got their hands on the ball during the game. Talking about drive length, they only had 1 drive that was longer than 7 plays. That was a 14-play drive that resulted in 3 points. They had a 7-play drive, and then everything else were in the 2, 3, 5-play range. And yeah, I mean, we can sit there and talk about, 45-31, whatever, but how many teams out there would have killed to have a 45-31 win? The expectations at Ohio State are always going to be high, and that's the way Ohio State likes it, because you can't have those expectations if you don't win a lot of games, and Ohio State's won a lot of games, and on to the next one.
Well, I've got tons of questions for you guys. I will go to the questions in the chat. David Greenshield, our buddy there, is asking about Mayan Williams being a 3-star. And of course, there were 5 stars making plays all over the field, but he was the 1 3-star out of the state of Ohio. Does that make sense that maybe we should be recruiting Ohio 3 stars more?
I'll touch on this one. they do want to recruit Ohio players more, but the players have to be there, and they're not always there. And Mayan Williams was a great find for Ohio State, but the reason they ended up with Mayan Williams is because they missed out on 5-star Bijan Robinson. And you look at Bijan Robinson, what he did last year, he ended up at Texas, and he rushed for 700 yards as a true freshman. And this year he's going to rush for 103 yards in his debut. Obviously, hey, Mayan Williams outdid him this week. But if you want to bring in more Ohio guys, you're going to have to leave somebody out. So who is that? Do you leave out Jeff Okudah? Do you leave out Chase Young? Do you leave out Abosa? Like there's some give and take there, and so you got to make sure you're giving up the right one for the right one. And yeah, there's plenty of Ohio guys who can play at Ohio State. We saw that for years under Jim Tressel, but then we also saw a talent disparity between Ohio State and the other top programs around the nation when they would play.
Yeah, and I think that you sit there and you say, well, this kid's a 3-star, therefore doesn't it mean they need to get more 3-stars? No, because the ranking is independent of the kid himself. You just need to go out and do your own evaluation. Now, I guess the situation is, do you sit there and look more in the state of Ohio? And sure, I mean, I think you need to look in the state of Ohio every year. And, we end up getting the gift of hindsight in terms of looking at recruiting, and we see this kid who goes to UC or this kid who goes to Kentucky or whatever. It's like, well, that kid could have been doing that at Ohio State. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean the same opportunities there, so on and so forth. So, I don't know. It's very easy to compartmentalize it and look at it and say, well, if this 3-star is doing this, therefore all 3-stars will be doing this. No, you can't necessarily look at it that way. And Ryan Day's staff does look within the state of Ohio, but as I've said on this show, multiple times, I think that the top few kids in Ohio are always going to be really, really good each year. What are you giving me between 7 and 20 in terms of the state? And that's ultimately what it ends up becoming and where those 3-stars reside. So Mayan Williams is Mayan Williams because he's Mayan Williams, not because he's a 3-star or anything like that. So I don't think you can just paint with a broad stroke and say that therefore they need more 3-stars.
Yeah, I'm of a mind that Ohio is going to provide talent to Ohio State, and it's almost like Ohio State is now selecting the guys from the state of Ohio, although we've seen a few guys leak out to Notre Dame and some different places here in recent years. Ohio State's doing a pretty good job of identifying the ones that they need to have. I think Mayan Williams is a guy that kind of fell in their lap. I think, wasn't he committed to Iowa State? Does that sound right? OSU had swung and missed on a bunch of running backs in that class, and I think it was late in the process that he switched over to Ohio State, was finally offered by the Buckeyes, and switched over as some of an afterthought. People thought, well, he'll never play at Ohio State. Well, lo and behold, they get low on running backs last year, and he gets shoved in there late in the season and sparks a couple big plays. And now here he is, the toast of the coast here to start the season with a huge play, a touchdown in the first quarter of the first game, and has kind of solidified his hold on that starting spot for right now. But Travion Henderson's also going to play. And I rewatched the game this morning, and my son and I were sitting here watching it. And, Master Teague is what he is. He's going to get you 6 or 8 tough yards. And, he's not necessarily chopped liver. I think if you get late in the game and you want to, take 4 minutes off the clock, he might be your guy to put in the game and pick up 3 or 4 first downs running the football and then, go shake their hand, basically. So he's a guy that's still got tremendous amount of value for this team. But I think that the upside for those other two, it's as plain as the nose on your face at this point. Those guys have got to play.
I got to say, Steve, in addition to all the knowledge, all the insight, the historical knowledge, the little quips that go under the radar, like then you go shake their hand, those are golden as well.
3 and a shake, babe. Let's go. Get it over with.
John Sarian's on the line. Asking about Cam Brown and Sevyn Banks. They were sorely missed on Thursday, And, of course, would be great to have in the lineup Tony on Saturday.
Yeah, nothing new yet. Ryan Day was really sometimes he never wants to talk about injuries. Sometimes he will. On Tuesday, he was just like, well, it'll be in the availability report. That's why we released the availability report. He was asked about Josh Proctor at that point, but also it was just an all-encompassing thing. It sure seems like Sevyn Banks should be back based on the fact that was like a game time thing that happened and kind of surprised people. Cam Brown, I don't know yet. We will get our availability report, Saturday morning at 9 a.m., which, it is what it is. It's better than getting nothing for sure. And we appreciate it. We definitely appreciate getting the updates. But at this point, I'm operating under the assumption that Banks will be back, but no idea that anybody else. I'm not expecting anybody else back, even though Kerry Combs said they're getting closer. But what does that mean? Who knows?
Yeah, my take on this, Patrick Murphy from our staff watched the warm-ups and noted that Sevyn Banks really didn't participate a whole lot. He may have stretched out and those kind of things and was in uniform, but really was not out there running around. And as Coach Day said, was really only available in an emergency capacity for that game. And as it turned out, there were no emergencies. The corners who played were able to go from start to finish, so that was good. Cameron Brown, you got to think, is farther away. The times that we got to go watch the team practice, I don't know if I ever recall seeing him on the field. So he probably missed a good portion of the preseason and is not or was not 100%, it seems, for a good portion of the preseason. So any rate, it's going to be what it's going to be. And the good news is they need to get through this week and this game against Oregon and win the game any way humanly possible, just kind of like the Minnesota game. Win the game left-handed if you have to with your backup players and your freshmen. I mean, they put a true freshman, Denzel Burke, in there, a redshirt freshman, Ryan Watts, a redshirt freshman, Lejon Cavazos. Cavazos had never played before. Burke had never played before. Watts had seen some action last year, but not a lot. So they muddled through with those three guys and got it done. And, give Oregon your best shot, I guess, with that personnel. And if Banks can play, so be it, maybe 30 or 40 plays. If you get 30 or 40 plays out of Banks this week, that would be huge, just to take some of the onus off those young guys. But again, I am not of a mind that this is the end of the world one way or the other. Those guys played pretty well, I thought, in their stead last week. And again, get through this, and then it's basically smooth sailing for a while, because it's Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, I think, are the next four games. Maybe Rutgers and Maryland will give them a similar type of challenge as Minnesota did. But again, I don't see past Oregon, a top 25 team in the offing anytime soon. So I think that they just need to kind of filibuster this weekend with what they got and get through it. It would help if the defensive front provided a little bit more pressure up front, take a little bit of the onus. I mean, Morgan could stand in all day for Minnesota. So, they need to play better team defense. That's how I'd look at it.
Sue makes a really good point here. Sue, it's good to see you. She joins us all the time. And we've got viewers from the Ohio State channel, the main channel, the Oregon channel, Twitter, and Facebook. We're simulcasting across the board. Big game, boys. This is big game week. So we went full throttle on this one. But Sue, DJ struggled. JT Daniels struggled. Sam Howell, I'll add him to the list. Spencer Radler struggled. Should have thrown 3 interceptions. So there are quarterbacks with a lot of more reps under their belts that have very high NFL draft status at this point that struggled. Now, to varying degrees because of offensive line play as well, but they struggled in addition. All right, Tony, let's tee up the coverage on Oregon. 31-24 winners on Fresno State, a game that was closer than it was supposed to be. They were pushed to the wire. They've got a veteran quarterback in Anthony Brown coming in from BC, was their part-time starter last year, put up unimpressive statistics, but managed the game against Fresno State. They've got veterans on the perimeter and in the backfield with guys like Johnny Johnson and CJ Verdell. And, of course, Kayvon Thibodeau is a huge factor in this game from the standpoint that if he's on the field and relatively healthy, then he could be a game changer, a la Zach Harrison and what we saw against Minnesota, because when he was in the game against Fresno State, he was a force, but he was in a walking boot during the second half. And Oregon is surprisingly a better defensive team at this point than they are an offensive team. So your initial thoughts about the Ducks and the matchup?
Yeah, and they're surprisingly a better defense with Kayvon Thibodeau in the lineup than they are without him, and that's going to be a huge situation. Mario Cristobal will be talking to the media in about an hour. We'll see how much of an update he provides. He did say a couple days ago that if Thibodeau doesn't practice this week, it probably wouldn't play because it's not good for the player and it's not good for the team if a guy hasn't gone through practice. But watching quite a bit of that Fresno State game, watch some of it live because, as I've said before, I'm one of the 7 people with the Pac-12 network. So I got to see that, not to brag, but I feel pretty special.
I upgraded for it. I paid $20 to Spectrum to upgrade for it.
I got that going for me.
Yeah. So you're right. Anthony Brown was like, I mean, it was okay. It wasn't anything to like put fear in people until you see that 30-yard touchdown run at the end. And you're reminded of what he can do on the ground. And this is something that Ohio State hasn't faced yet. And this is something that they're going to have to face. And, he carried the ball 16 times. Let's see how Ohio State does against the running quarterback. It's the equalizer, as we all know. And this is going to be a defense that is built to face the spread. Oregon will be running the spread. So let's see what it looks like. And I just wrote today that this is going to be a better representative of what we're going to see. This is going to be a better representative of the Ohio State defense. I don't know if it's going to be a better defense, but I know it's more designed for games against teams like Oregon than it is for games against teams like Minnesota with 7 offensive linemen. Now, Oregon does play like 7 offensive linemen. They do some rotation, so we'll see if they borrow some of that stuff from Minnesota. But if they borrow some of that stuff, they're going to be taking away from what they already do and what they want to do. So there's going to be some give and take there. We'll see what they end up doing. But I see a team that didn't run very well against Fresno. They got stopped short a couple of times. They had some difficulty there. Verdell averaged about 4 yards per carry, which they need to do better there. I'm just interested to see how Ohio State does defending Anthony Brown on the ground. I think they'll be fine through the air, but how does he do picking up those first downs on third down scrambles, and how does he do with the read option, things like that? I think he'll keep it interesting. I just don't know if the Oregon defense can keep up.
Yeah, I look at Oregon, and Anthony Brown isn't going to light the world on fire as a thrower. But then again, we say that, and then the guy comes out and has a career game. It's just kind of one of those situations. They have 3 guys that are very talented in running the ball, with Brown being one of them. And fortunately for Ohio State, through the years, they have produced enough quarterbacks who are able to run the ball, so they at least have an idea of what that look is like. So, it's going to be a matter of taking that from the fields at the Woody Hayes facility and taking that, across the street over there to Ohio Stadium and be able to execute there. I'm with the other 379 million plus people in America, and I don't get Pac-12 network, so I've only seen some bits and clips of it or whatnot. Not overly impressed with the offense. I don't like to give a lot of notice or a lot of attention to rumors out there, but there seems to be a fast circulating rumor that linebacker Justin Flo could potentially be injured. If they don't have Thibodeau and Flo, they're in a lot of trouble, because that defense, when I think about them, is Thibodeau, Flo, and Noah Sewell. And if they're down 2 of these guys, lock in your 13.5 right now. Just lock it in, because they're going to be in a lot of trouble at that point.
Yeah, they also lost Drew Mathis, who was a linebacker, and I think he was having a pretty good game when he got injured. I think in this game, I think he suffered a knee injury, and he's probably not going to – well, he's definitely not going to play, I don't think. So he's not listed in their release anywhere. So Drew Mathis, he had a couple tackles before he got injured. So take him off the list. Thibodeau had 2 tackles and a sack and forced a fumble before he went out. And it's interesting to note that Fresno State, which is picked as one of the contenders in the Mountain West, made their big run in the second half when Thibodeau was out of the game. I think that was very telling. First of all, I think that Fresno was a better team than anybody gave them credit for. Oregon was a 20-point favorite, and I think I picked them to win by like 10. They won by 7. I mean, I just didn't see it, that type of thing. Brown to me seems like a JT Barrett kind of a effective program manager. His touchdown run, he didn't show a lot of speed. He just kind of meandered his way through the defense and just kind of eventually ended up in the end zone. And, it reminded me of a JT Barrett touchdown run, just kind of all over the place, and they can't tackle me. And here I go. It wasn't like he outran everybody. So I don't know. I see that if they put their pieces together and don't turn the ball over and don't hurt themselves, then maybe they'll sustain some drives. They're not the finesse team I think that a lot of people want to aspire them to be. I think they are kind of a power running team at times out of the spread. And I think that, they are more of an offensive line program, I think, than people want to give them credit for. Defensively, I think they're okay, but without Thibodeau and without Mathis, and possibly Flo, you just wonder, how good will they really be? So I'm interested to see. I think I did a podcast yesterday, and I kind of likened this game. Back in 2010, Ohio State played Miami of Florida. And it was Jim Tressel's last year as the head coach. It was kind of a similar type setup. Ohio State heavily favored at home against a program that you think is up near the top, but you're not really sure. And there were a little bit of questions here and there about some things. And Miami stayed in the game, made some plays. Ohio State made some plays on offense with Terrell Pryor, and they won the game 36-24. It wasn't a blowout, but just a solid win. And honestly, that's all Ohio State needs. They don't need to go out and impress anybody. They don't need to go out and blow Oregon out, 40-14 or anything stupid. They just need to go out and play solid football, take care of the football, and win the game. And I think if they do that, there's no problem with this one, in my opinion.
If I'm not mistaken, that Miami team was pretty highly regarded at that point in the season, was close to top 10 status, and I think they finished 7-6. To Kevin's point, Justin Flo, 14 total tackles, 5 solos, 14 total tackles for a very highly sought-after player coming out of high school. Noah Sewell was the Pac-12 Rookie of the Year, I believe, overall last year, even as a defensive player. Kayvon Thibodeau, for those of you that follow the NFL draft, even though he hasn't made a huge splash nationally in terms of the plays that he's made, in obviously a very limited sample size of 7 games last year, when he was on the field for those 7 games, a Pac-12 championship game and a Fiesta Bowl included. Yeah, he's a man. He's possibly the number 1 pick in the NFL draft coming up. So to that point, Kevin, I'll lean on you for some recruiting, although you all three follow it, of course. Mario Cristobal is bringing in the best classes in the Pac-12 at Oregon. Do you think there's a decided talent advantage for Ohio State overall?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Because Mario Cristobal is bringing in the best classes on the West Coast, or the best classes in the Pac-12. Ohio State's bringing in the best classes in the nation. So, I think that, we do see Oregon beat Ohio State head-to-head on some West Coast kids. It's just going to happen or whatever. But there are a lot of kids that Ohio State is in on that Oregon isn't even at the table. And, I jump into with JT Tuimoloau and say that we all kind of figured he was going to be playing in this game. Was he going to be wearing a scarlet jersey, or white or green or yellow or fuchsia or plaid or whatever Oregon's going to trot out there? I think we all kind of felt he was going to end up at Ohio State. But with that being said, I do think that 1-22 and 1-85, Ohio State certainly has a decided talent advantage. I will say this, though, too, that if we're looking just at the 2022 NFL draft upcoming, the best player on the field, maybe, or in a walking boot, belongs to Oregon with Kayvon Thibodeau, because he's a top 3, top 1, depending on what you look at, type of draft pick. But I think once you kind of get beyond that, Ohio State just has a ton more depth.
I'll throw in, I'm just looking up right now, their last 4 classes for Oregon, the 2021 class, the guys who are freshmen, that class was ranked 6th. Then prior to that, in 2020, they were 11th. In 2019, they were 7th. And in 2018, they were 13th. So their average ranking of these classes is 37, about 9 for the 4 years. They've averaged a top 10 class every year. Ohio State had the 1 year with Ryan Day when he first got there, I think in 19, when there was a lot of problem about whether Meyer was going to stay or not. And that class ended up 13th, I think, for 2019. But otherwise, Ohio State's had a top 5 class. So they've probably averaged around 4 or 5, as their class ranking over the last 4 years. And so there's a small disparity, but Oregon has recruited on a very respectable level nationally over the last 4 years. But Ohio State certainly got more 5 and 4 stars across the board than Oregon.
One interesting note, with you have freshman cornerback Jaylen Davies at Oregon. Ohio State essentially passed on him to go with Denzel Burke, and both of those guys are ranked around the same in the recruiting rankings. And you saw, I think Ohio State made the correct choice so far with Denzel Burke getting that start last week and playing well. But when you look at where those two guys are in their respective classes, like Davies is like the 9th highest rated guy in Oregon's class. Denzel Burke is like 15th highest rated guy in Ohio State's class, to give you an idea of where similar players are in their respective classes. And just one little interesting note there. And another one would be Chris Olave wanting to become an Oregon Duck, and Oregon not recruiting him until Ohio State had already offered him and pretty much wrapped him up. So unfortunate there for the Ducks that Chris Olave and his entire family wanted him to be an Oregon football player. And one of the reasons why he wanted to play for Oregon, he did mention the jerseys. So when people get upset about, that the uniforms can't possibly be a recruiting draw, I give you Chris Olave. But you can't have him because he went to Ohio State.
If my son were good enough to play college football just about anywhere and he was making his decision based on jersey selection, boy, we would have a talk. That would be for sure. Regardless, it's working out pretty well for Chris Olave, so I guess I can't argue with that type of even though he wanted to go to Oregon, it's still working out very well for him, obviously. This is way off the beaten path, but I'm going to address this comment real quick here from this is coming in from Matthew. Basically, Matthew, Ohio State has not been gifted any selections into the college football playoff. It can be debated that they did not earn the spot in 16, but there's certainly justification for it. And if anything, they were left out in 17 and 18, and we could certainly justify their selection those 2 years. All right. This is a noon kickoff Eastern. We're asking Oregon to travel across the country, play at 9 o'clock, their body clock, Pacific time. And this is the plight of the Pac-12, basically, as we need to accommodate everybody else because we want to be relevant. They emerged from the pandemic last year playing a 9 a.m. local time game in Los Angeles, USC and Arizona State, again, to grab that what is a prime time window for the Fox programming strategy is grabbing that noon Eastern time window. So, guys, what do we think? I guess I'll start with Steve. Do we think this is significant that Oregon has to play at 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time?
Well, I think it is tough on them. I think what we saw going to Ohio State's practices, however, is during preseason camp, Ohio State was practicing at 9 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning a lot of times to avoid the heat of the afternoon. And I'm not sure what Oregon did during the preseason, but if they did have any number of practices at 8:30 or 9 o'clock local time, then playing a football game on that body clock time of 9 in the morning shouldn't be that big of a deal to them. I mean, it's the travel. I presume they're coming out Thursday, typically teams that cross the country do go out an extra day early to acclimate a little better, and really to have Friday to put their feet up and get rid of the jet lag and then be ready to play, be fresh and play a football game on Friday, or rather on Saturday. So it is a little bit of an impact. I think it sucks from the standpoint for the Pac-12 and the Oregon fans. But Fox is all in. They've pushed all their chips into the middle of the table on this big noon branding that they love. And if they've got their hands on a marquee game, you can pretty much rest assured it's going to be in the noon time slot, because CBS and ABC and potentially even NBC at times now are going to put some of their bigger games, and ESPN certainly at night. It's more of a crowded time slot at 7:30, 8 o'clock. So not as many marquee games played across the country at noon Eastern time. And so that's where Fox has taken up shop, and their ratings dictate that it's probably a good decision. Ohio State, Minnesota was very widely viewed on Thursday night. I believe the ratings came back at just short of 7 million on average. Watch that game. It won the night in prime time against reality TV and reruns and other things. So Fox has got a bit of a machinery, even though they don't have the playoff. They are able to drive an audience to some of these major sporting events and top games, and they've found a way to do it. So this is their thing. And, Ohio State fans don't like it. They think that this should be a 3:30 or a 7 o'clock game. And I'm with them. I understand that. From my standpoint, I cover a high school game Friday. I imagine these guys will probably be out at a game too. And then you have to get to bed and get up and get down there 8:30. And Ohio State's telling their people, one, because all the parking passes are going to be on your smartphone now. And secondly, there's going to be delays getting into the stadium because your tickets are on your smartphone as well. And you got to go through security and everything else. So they're telling people to get down there early. So you ordinarily would get down there early. I mean, you can't even tailgate for a noon game. You get down there by 10 o'clock, set your table up, eat your food, drink your beer. And 11 o'clock, you got to tear it all down because it's time to go in and watch the band. So, I hate the noon games for rushing around. But as these guys know, I love clocking out at 7 o'clock and finding wherever we can find the cold Budweiser, I guess, at that point. So that's the good thing.
Kevin's got a roll, but if you want to say anything about Ohio State, Oregon, anything on your plate, Kevin, go.
I had a whole speech to sit there and tell the people that just can't handle the noon games to suck it up, Buttercup. That's life in the big city, but I got to go. I know that I need to get in and get my picks in for this game, but I definitely like Ohio State with or without Thibodeau, with or without Flo. I think that without both of them, it certainly makes the path easier, but I think we're going to see a lot of growth from Ohio State from week 1 to week 2. I don't think Oregon is nearly as bad as what we saw in the Fresno State game, but I don't think Ohio State's nearly as bad as what we saw in terms of maybe some of it's being stuck in neutral against Minnesota. A return home to Ohio Stadium is going to be just what the doctor ordered for the team, and I'm really looking forward to seeing fans in that stadium for the first time since 2019. So with that, that's all I got.
Kevin Noon, follow him on Buckeyes Scoop. Get on over there. Thank you so much, Kevin. Enjoy the game.
See you guys.
Yep.
All right, let's bring it home. Tony's on a short leash as well. Needs to jump at 2:30 sharp, correct?
That is correct.
Excellent.
I will also say regarding the 9 a.m. kickoff, I couldn't imagine doing anything at 9 in the morning in college. So I feel for these kids. I hope they're okay. And good luck to those Oregon kids who, as Steve said, they are getting in. They are coming in Thursday night. So they'll have all day Friday to get acclimated to East Coast time.
But absolutely. And to underline that, we're not asking them to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and go run some errands or do a few chores around the house. We're asking them to run like 20 miles an hour and run right into another human being at 9 o'clock in the morning. So it's a little more difficult than my usual routine in trying to drag myself out of bed on a Saturday morning as well. We got NBA fan getting back to CJ Stroud and the quarterback situation. NBA fan. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Stroud is the first quarterback at Ohio State since Todd Beckman, 2007, that did not do anything better than the quarterback before him. Of course, we're looking at a one-game sample, excluding the Bosserman interlude. Thoughts, Steve?
What? You lost me. This is the second most yards I think a quarterback has ever thrown in their first start behind Dwayne Haskins' 300-yard game. So, I have no clue whatever you're trying to get at. Justin Fields and whatever, his debut was 19. I don't know. Come on, man. I don't know what you're getting at. Again, he did it was raining. It was night. It was on the road. Ohio State usually opens at home against, Toledo or somebody. I mean, come on. What? I don't get it. I don't get it. Quality opponent.
I will. Was Braxton Miller? I guess he was better than Terrell Pryor. He improved upon Terrell Pryor, and I think that's what NBA fan is asking. That you've seen these steps, and I think the reason you don't necessarily see a step up from Justin Fields is because Justin Fields is the best quarterback in Ohio State football history. Before him,
per capita.
And before him, Dwayne Haskins was the best passing quarterback in Ohio State history. Before him, JT Barrett was the most prolific quarterback in Ohio State history. And then before him, you had Braxton Miller, who was going to be close to like the all-time leading rusher and all-time leading passer in Ohio State history. So they've had a good run. And so, CJ Stroud could eventually get there, but game one, it's really hard to improve on what Justin Fields did. And I think, and I'm not saying NBA fan I think maybe he's just pointing out, hey, look at this. This is the first time since whenever that Ohio State hasn't expounded, and through no fault of CJ Stroud's own. I just think, Justin Fields is up here, and everybody else is, down there, and they've got a ways to go to catch him.
Yeah, if you're taking it like that, and Tony, that's a good way to look at that question or comment, is the steps can only go so high. So once they recruit and sign the next Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, yes, then they'll hit the very top. But it's kind of a difficult climb from here. But as Steve says, 4 touchdowns and 294 in the book is pretty good, and 45 points on the board, 38 on offense.
He did have more total yards than Justin Fields in Fields' debut in 2019 as well, and I believe that was against Florida Atlantic.
We touched on the defense.
I'm going to swear if Florida freaking Atlantic. We're comparing. I mean, Minnesota had everybody back on defense, for God's sake. What are we doing?
We got a super chat out of it, Steve.
I guess.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If you guys could have heard, well, I'm sure you guys, of course, you get your portion more so than I do as Ohio State beat writers, but I took calls after the game, and there was a fairly large portion of people that thought CJ Stroud should have been on that bench about halfway through the second quarter.
Well, he wasn't sharp. I will grant you that. He admitted he was not locked in. We watched it again, and there was one pass down the middle to Garrett Wilson, went 20 yards over his head, it looked like. And then obviously the interception was high and wide behind Chris Olave on a crossing route, like they didn't have their timing. And I'm sitting in the press conference, said there was a miscommunication there. And I turned to whoever was next to me, there was no miscommunication. It was a terrible throw. It was behind the wide receiver. The young quarterback made a freshman throw, and that's what it looks like. I mean, guys, they're not robots. They're not interchangeable drill bits. He didn't show up with Justin Fields' experience and ability on day one. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Denzel Burke didn't show up with Jeffrey Okudah's experience and ability on day one. It just doesn't work that way. Same with LeJon Cavazos, who, gave up a touchdown. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. That's what youth and it was a total reboot in the back seven on defense. There was one holdover, Josh Proctor. Every other position, not only were there new starters from the end of last year, but some of them had never played at the college level, in Burke's case at all. In the case of Cody Simon and Lathan Ransom and Ronnie Hickman, not much at all. Dallas Gant, not much at all. Tommy Eichenberg, certainly not much at all. So, the result's the result. And it's really easy to understand if you have half a brain and have watched college football for 30 years. You understand that young players go through growing pains. They lose games. They honestly, that is a setup where in years past, an Ohio State team would have gone in there and lost the game. They just have so much talent that they can't even lose a game, when in most cases, a lot of teams like North Carolina went into Virginia Tech and got beat, and Ohio State somehow survived. So.
And we also discovered this past weekend that Montana, they've got a school that plays football in Montana, and they beat Washington. Yes, absolutely. It happens.
Favorites. I know that if you go to the Phil Steele book, you come to the Washington page before you come to the Oregon page. So I think a lot of that has to do with Oregon's schedule is like at Ohio State, at Stanford, although they got crushed in their opener, at UCLA, who's on the verge of being ranked if they're not, at Washington, their rival in the division, at Utah. So another good team from the other division. So their schedule is absolutely treacherous this season for them. And so, we'll see how it plays out. But Oregon's shaping up now to be the class of the North.
We got a good crowd in here. So for those of you who don't join us on a regular basis, we're on the Ohio State channel every Wednesday. Our new time is 1:30 Eastern. 1:30 Eastern. Tony, we'll let you tackle this next question because it kind of carries right through what Steve was talking about in regards to the rush defense, bad angles, new linebackers. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see where the Maryland comparison would be on that one run from Mohamed Ibrahim, but it was one run. It was a 4th and 1. There was a missed tackle there. They do need to continue to work on leverage. That is for sure, because you don't want to get into that situation again. But that Maryland game, there were like 3 runs like that. Minnesota, there was 1, and like I said, there was a missed tackle. And how many times on 4th down do you see a 4th and 1? It busts through because the line of defense isn't as far back. And so if you just get through that first line, there's a lot of times you're gone, and that's what happened there. So I'm not so concerned about the run defense right now because I don't know how often we're going to see what Minnesota does. And it was also interesting to hear Ryan Day and Kerry Combs complain a little bit about how the officials weren't giving them time to substitute and get set before, or they weren't, because Oregon would substitute or Minnesota would substitute, Ohio State would try to match it, and then they wouldn't be given much time to get set and get ready, and so they felt like the refs weren't giving them enough time. So there are a number of issues there, but also let's not forget Mohamed Ibrahim is the best running back in the Big Ten, one of the best in the country. So I think it's okay to give him some credit because this running game, he's a really tough runner. Looked like Roger Craig at one point. I know we know who he is. Maybe nobody else does, but just a tough running guy. And give him some credit. And again, Ohio State will need to tackle better. 9 padded practices in their 25 fall camp practices. So it takes a while to get secure in your tackling game, I believe.
Go Jay! Thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Appreciate that. Regardless of whether it was Tony or Steve that spurred you on to the contribution there, saluting the I like this brother talking. Nice. It definitely wasn't me. So thank you, Go Jay, so much for that. All right. Zach Harrison makes this play that somewhat changes the game, and it's the kind of play we've been waiting for. This is why you recruit and sign the 5-star. He can do that sort of game-changing type play. I don't know that anyone noticed what Zach Harrison was doing the rest of the game. You guys can both jump in on this in regards to evaluation of his play, this super duper defensive line with JTT getting a few snaps correct.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Jack Sawyer, did he get into the game? I
About
didn't
4
notice.
he
snaps.
did. I'll let Tony give his 2 cents, and then I can.
Yeah.
If he's got a scoot, then I can take it.
Well, Zach Harrison played like 65 snaps, which is about double what they want their defensive ends to play, and he did great out of champion. So even though we may not have been paying attention to what he was doing, obviously the coaches felt it was good enough, and he was one of the players that talked at the end of the game, so they were happy with his performance. I think those of us who were just watching the game measured defensive ends and sacks and tackles for loss and things like that. And I think if you're playing 65, I think we'd like to see more than just the one. But also, again, going back to that offensive line, they're pretty good. There are a lot of them. Sometimes you get around one tackle and there's another tackle waiting for you, and it's a little bit unfair. So I think you might see more from him this week. Kayvon Thibodeau gets all of the attention. Those guys were in the same recruiting class, in the same the 2019 class, I believe. And so this is an opportunity for Zach Harrison to show the nation that, hey, I'm somebody too. So I think he's one to watch. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.
Thank you,
guys
Tony.
next week.
Appreciate that.
Yep. I'll just say that what Ohio State needs desperately is a more consistent pass rush. And Tyreek Smith, should be a contract year to play his way into the NFL. Zach Harrison trying to hopefully get drafted in the first round of the NFL, has some talent, but that's got to manifest itself. The defensive tackles were okay. They just need to make more of an impact on the opposing quarterback. And I think if they do that, then your young defensive backs won't be exposed quite as bad. And this was what we talked about all last season, how there just wasn't a consistent pass rush from Ohio State. And now they're one game into 2021, and that really hasn't changed a whole lot. You think that the playmakers are there. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, just standing there, he looks like $1 million. Now he's got to make some plays. I don't even think he had a tackle in this game. He played a substantial number of plays as well. So he got sucked inside on the big run by Ibrahim. So did Craig Young, who was playing the bullet linebacker safety position. Lejon Cavazos was filling and slipped and didn't make the tackle, and now Ibrahim's off to the races. So that was reminiscent of the Maryland play with McFarland a few years ago. But at the same time, none of those three guys were starters, and they kind of caught them in a sequence where they had substituted some other guys into the game, and it really bit them. As it turned out, that was a touchdown, on those two plays, that one and then the throw over the top over Cavazos. So, does that happen if you have the guys who started the game in there? I don't know. But, again, those guys can't play every play of every series all game long. They're going to break down. So you got to have some good help off the bench. And I think some lessons were learned, I think, in the course of that game for Ohio State defensively, because guys were put in positions they've never been in before. But it does start up front. They need a more consistent pass rush. Harrison, to me, let's see as this season goes on. If he makes one or two plays like that every game, they're going to be in great shape. And, not necessarily stripping the ball for a touchdown, but, they need more negative plays. I think I had the box score here. They may have only had 3 tackles for loss in the entire game, which is a very low number. I know, obviously, Cody Simon had 1 on a sack right before halftime. Harrison gets 1 on the strip. Yeah, here it is. Tackles for loss. 4 tackles for loss. Cody Simon, Antoine Jackson had 1 on a running play, I believe. Zach Harrison. Well, they total up 4, and Taraja Mitchell had 1 on the outside on a running play as well. So 4 tackles for loss out of 78 plays ran by Minnesota. That's not a high ratio. You would typically like to see that. If they run 78 plays, you would like to have 7 or 8 of them go for a loss with 3. If you can get 3 sacks a game, that's a pretty good number. They had 2. More than 3 would be great, I think. And, 4 is obviously phenomenal. So, those are the numbers they need to strive to hit. And I think that what really confounded Ohio State was the inability on first down, at least in the first 3 quarters when Ibrahim was there, from stopping him on first down. He was getting yards in 6 and 7 and 8 yard chunks on first down. And now, as one of the old offensive coordinators from Ohio State said, it's second and short. And it may have even been Jim Tressel that said this. And he's like, that's a freewheeling down. You have the entire playbook in front of you on 2nd and 2. You can either run for the first down or you could throw a deep pass. And whatever you do, as long as you don't turn it over, doesn't hurt you. So, or, give up a sack, obviously. But, you look at it too often, they were allowing Minnesota to have 2nd and manageable, 3rd and manageable, and they converted those and sustained drives. And that's why they ran 78 plays. That's why they had the ball for 39 minutes. But it was vintage on the first drive of the game that Minnesota picked up 2 or 3 first downs, but at the 40-yard line, Ohio State slammed the door on them, forced the punt, got the ball back, and drove the length of the field and went down and scored. That's how you win football games, is eventually getting that stop, getting off the field, converting on offense, lather, rinse, repeat. You got to do it for 4 quarters to beat a good team, and they're going to have to do it this Saturday against Oregon because, we talked that Oregon, they don't look like they're the number 3 or 4 team in the country, but they don't look like they're the number 25 team in the country either. They look like probably about where they're ranked, 10, 11, 12, and could really give you some fits. If everything that they do hits, they're going to give you a couple fits in this game.
I can sell you. Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Steve, if you've got just a minute or two, I wanted to ask you about the running back distribution, because you touched upon it with Master Teague, maybe being the ultimate closeout back in a 4-minute drill up by a score. We saw Mayan Williams get loose. We saw the Travion Henderson breakout play on the little dump off to the left side. How do you think this is going to play out going forward? Obviously, this is a huge game, so this should really tell the tale of who's valued in what situations.
Yeah, they only got to run 48 plays, so we didn't get to see perhaps the full,
True.
how they would rotate in a regular game because they were scoring too quickly in the second half. They were scoring on 1 or 2 big plays. They ran 48 plays. There were 22 passes and 26 runs, which is close to 50-50 distribution. I'm not sure that that's what it'll look like. If they get this up closer to 65 or 70 plays, it'll probably be 60% run and 40% pass, or, a variant of that. But if you're talking about 60% runs on 70 plays, that's close to 40 runs per game. Figure Stroud is going to be in that 5 to 8 range. So there goes, now you're down to about 30 of them, 35 maybe. I would think in a normal game, you're going to see Williams around 15. Henderson is a freshman. I think that they're going to bring him along slowly and use him in. I mean, he needs to play, and that clamor is he needs to play more. He needs to play more. Well, you don't want to kill the goose that lays those golden eggs. I think you want to pick and choose. You don't want to be slamming Travion Henderson up in there into the 300-pound guys. I don't think that's a prudent use for him. You want to get that guy outside on the, maybe set some things up with Mayan and Teague in the middle, and then get it out to the outside with Henderson and watch him go, because they're going to block that perfectly. As we saw on his little screen pass over the top, it was Smith-Njigba, Ruckert, and Olave leading the convoy for him down the field, and nobody even got, maybe somebody laid a hand on him on the way by, but he showed vision and changed lanes and accelerated, and it was an exciting play. So I think there is a place for Master Teague, and as Coach Day said, I think the other day, it is a long season, and we are going to need them all. And, I think that the truer words have been spoken, because those guys have a tendency to get banged up, have an ankle here or, a sprained knee there sometimes, and can get in and out of the lineup. But I think Mayan Williams is the lead dog. I think Travion Henderson is the speedy changeup guy. I think Master Teague is the power guy. And then if you just want to filibuster, you got Marcus Crowley, who seems pretty dependable to me. He had 6 carries for 19 yards in the garbage time. So he got a little taste at the end as well when they were up 2 touchdowns and helped them kind of run out the clock. Stroud only carried it 3 times in this game. I don't recall many, if any, designed runs for him. It looked to me like a couple of his runs came on third down when no one was open, and he just kind of ate it and ran out. He was never sacked in the game, which was good. Obviously, this offensive line is just oppressive. What they are, impressive and oppressive with what they do. And so I want to see going forward, what the running attack looks like. But I think you got a pretty solid plethora of running backs there.
Folks, we hope you appreciate what we deliver here each and every Wednesday, 1:30 Eastern. That's a new time, 1:30 Eastern here every Wednesday. You got Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Tony Gerdeman as well. It's an amazing panel. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. If you contribute to this show, put Ohio State on there. And please consider that, because we want to keep this going for as long as possible. Steve, you've spoken to this comment in the past by our guy David Whalen regarding good Ohio State defenses that had maybe elite play in the secondary, maybe elite play up front, but in that linebacker core in particular, maybe lacked in foot speed as really good Big Ten players. Maybe they got against some elite players in space and weren't up to the challenge. Do you think this linebacker core might be different?
Well, Dave raises a big point. I think the bigger issue now is experience and getting these guys seasoning to where instinctually they can just turn it loose. And in that regard, I think Ronnie Hickman, who played the Bullet in this game, they nicknamed him the Rocket. I think this was kind of a coming out party for Ronnie Hickman. He had 11 tackles and led the team in this game playing the Bullet position, which seems like it was made for him. He's going to be a hard one to get out of the lineup if he's going to play like that every week. And he does bring that kind of closing speed that you need to make plays. Lathan Ransom was playing the cover safety position, the slot corner position that Marcus Williamson played last year. They went to Lathan Ransom for this first game. He made his first start, and he did pretty well too. Kind of a bang-up job, I thought, by him. To my way of thinking, when Kerry Combs left and went to the NFL for a couple of years, and then you had Grinch was there for a year and Hafley was there for a year. It was kind of a revolving door of assistant coaches that were in the secondary, and Matt Barnes kind of helped out there a little bit. Now he's the safety coach. I think while Combs was gone, they didn't sign any national top 100 cornerbacks, and that's coming home to really bite them right now. You have to go back several years to find where they signed a national top 100 cornerback. The last one might have been Tyreek Johnson, who transferred out of the program. Jeff Okuda maybe before that a year or two. So, that dearth of high-end corners, they just haven't had them. And so now this year they've kind of gotten back into that with J.K. Johnson. Not sure what Denzel Burke was ranked, cusp of the top 100 maybe, I don't know. But he's playing like a top 100 guy, in my opinion. He had a pass interference penalty in the end zone. Looked to me like he came out and fought, his behind off first time he's ever been on the football field for Ohio State. So that's the kind of guy that if he brings that kind of tenacity, it kind of reminds you a little bit of a Malcolm Jenkins getting out there as a true freshman and really battling. That was years ago, almost 15 years ago. But, that's the kind of a guy that reminds me of somebody who was a gamer, a baller from day one. And so the speed is one thing, and I can't really give you an answer on that. I think they've got good enough team speed, but more important than that is just learning, understanding, and being able to immediately trigger and make plays. And I thought Hickman showed that identification and triggering and, coming downhill and stopping the runner close to the line of scrimmage. That was what was important in this last game. It will always be important. And I think Hickman showed that ability. So they may be going with the Bullet linebacker more than three linebackers, three traditional linebackers as they have in the past.
Right, Steve. People need to know where they can find you, where they can hear you.
Yes, bucknuts.com is the website, and at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter And again, we're going to be all over everything going on this week with Ohio State versus Oregon, one of the big marquee games of the week, one of the top non-conference games of the entire college football season. And, another notch for Ohio State. If they can come home and win this game, as we said, Coach Day has already made reference to it, that after this, they can come up for air. And, Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, prepare for, some tougher challenges down the line. Get some people healthy. Get Cameron Brown and Seven Banks, Harry Miller, the center on offense. Get all those guys healthy. Jerron Cage is an important guy, defensive tackle. They played without him this past week. He'd be a backup there. Get all those guys healthy and get them going, and that's going to make a huge difference.
You get my picks, you get Steve's picks, you get the media members of 20 different platforms picks at Patreon. So join us there. Also, voiceofcollegefootball.com, voiceofcollegefootball.com. You can gear up with your favorite team, Ohio State, Oregon, whomever it is, and check out our store there. If you go to the top of the screen, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Again, if you guys really need to consider what's going on here every week, every Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time. We've got a tremendous show. Steve, Kevin, and Tony, please Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just put Ohio State on that contribution. Steve, we always appreciate it. Have a great time. I know you got to get up. You said be at the stadium around 8:30 or so.
I don't think I'll be there quite that early. Ordinarily for a noon game, I would probably try and leave the house. I'd watch the first half hour of game day, leave at 9:30, and hope to be parked by 10:15. This week, I'll probably leave a little earlier just to make sure that I don't have any problem getting down there. So, and I think that's what they're urging everybody. Anybody who's listening to this or watching this, if you're going to the game, go early and plan to stay late, because it's going to be little messy this first time out with everybody's parking passes on their smartphone. The highway patrolmen are going to want to shoot themselves probably after this one, because ordinarily, you drive through, you have your placard, and they can just see it and wave you on through. Now they've physically got to look at your phone, it seems like, and this just has cluster written all over it.
And what is the deal with the non-sellout? 10,000 seats empty, especially when the MAC games get sold out. Every game's been sold out since I've been alive, except maybe, 2 or 3 for us in our lifetime?
It is somewhat crazy. I think, they're down a little bit in season ticket sales. Ordinarily, they have about 6% attrition from one year to the next. This year, it's down a little bit more. I asked Gene Smith that there was one contingent that didn't renew more than any other, if it was students or whatever it was, and he said no, it's kind of across the board the same. And I don't know what to make of it, other than it could have to do with the Delta variant with COVID and people not wanting to be surrounded by crowds. It could have to do, the ticket prices. Ohio State's gone to premium game prices. So the single game price for this from Ohio State is $160, which sounds like a lot if you want to go to a game. People who just swallow and know that their season ticket every year is going to be, a lot of money, $700-800, whatever that is on average. They just kind of swallow and pay it and don't worry too much about it, the individual game prices. But they are down a little bit in season ticket sales. Their website through Ticketmaster is allowing some fans to put their tickets back in to the system and name their price. And some people have put tickets back into the system, and you can get a ticket through Ticketmaster for $120, as low as that. I saw yesterday, and I wonder if some of those resale people will go in there and even price them lower just to move them before game day. This could be under $100 on a $160 face value ticket. And so there is some sticker shock, some COVID, some noon. As we said, noon makes it harder to enjoy the full game day experience. And, again, people may have gotten out of the habit of going to the games, watching them all at home last year. And so I think it's a combination of things. Minnesota sold out all 51,000 of their tickets, although there were a few people that didn't show up, I think, because of the rain last week, or the threat of rain. But it was largely a full stadium, but half the size of Ohio Stadium. So that goes with the territory, I guess.
Steve, it's always great to have you here. You're the man. We appreciate you being here, and enjoy the game the rest of the week, everything you got to cover.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We're looking forward to it.
All right, folks. We've got Florida State at 6, Miami at 7, and then that huge Iowa State game. We're going to preview that at 9 Eastern time tonight. So we'll see.